The autumn air was crisp that Friday night in October 1997, carrying the scent of burning leaves and the distant aroma of concession stand hot dogs across the parking lot of Millfield High School in rural Ohio. The stadium lights cast long shadows between the cars as families and students made their way home after another victorious game for the Millfield Eagles. 17-year-old Sarah Beth Collins adjusted her letter jacket and waved goodbye to her teammates from the cheerleading squad, her blonde ponytail bouncing as she called out promises to see them at tomorrow's car wash fundraiser. Sarah Beth had been the picture of small-town perfection that night, captain of the varsity cheerleading squad, honor roll student, and the kind of girl who still said please and thank you to the elderly ticket takers at the gate. Her parents, Robert and Linda Collins, had watched proudly from the stands as their daughter led the crowd in victory chants, never imagining it would be the last time they'd see her smile. If you're watching this story unfold and finding it as captivating as we do, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from viewers around the world. Now let's continue with what happened that night that changed everything for the Collins family and the entire town of Millfield. The last confirmed sighting of Sarah Beth was at 10:47 p.m., captured on the school's grainy security camera as she walked toward the student parking lot, where her red 1995 Honda Civic waited under a flickering streetlight. She had her cheerleading bag slung over one shoulder and her car keys in her hand, just like hundreds of other nights before. But something was different that evening, though no one could pinpoint exactly what. Margaret Henley, a senior who parked 2 spaces away, later told police she remembered seeing Sarah Beth's car still in the lot when she left around 11:15 p.m. The driver's door was open, Margaret recalled during her interview. I thought maybe she was just getting something out of the back seat, but now I wish I'd stopped to check on her. By midnight, when Sarah Beth hadn't come home, Linda Collins began pacing the living room of their modest 2-story house on Maple Street. Sarah Beth was never late without calling, and she certainly never missed her weekend curfew of 11:30 p.m. Robert tried to reassure his wife, suggesting maybe the car had broken down or Sarah Beth had gone to Denny's with friends and lost track of time. But Linda's mother's intuition was screaming that something was terribly wrong. The Collins family called the Millfield Police Department at 12:30 a.m. Officer Jim Patterson, a 20-year veteran who had watched Sarah Beth grow up in their tight-knit community of 8,000 residents, took the call personally. Within an hour, he was at the high school with his flashlight, examining Sarah Beth's Honda Civic, which sat exactly where Margaret Henley had described. Driver's door ajar, keys nowhere to be found, and Sarah Beth's cheerleading bag lying on the ground beside the car as if it had been dropped in haste. The initial investigation revealed troubling details. Sarah Beth's purse was still in the car, her wallet intact with $63 in cash and her driver's license. Her cell phone, a bulky Motorola that most teenagers cherished, was plugged into the car charger, showing no missed calls or messages after 10:30 p.m. Most disturbing of all, there were signs of a struggle, dirt scuffs on the driver's side door, and a small cluster of blonde hairs caught in the doorframe that matched Sarah Beth's. Detective Maria Santos from the county sheriff's office took over the case within 48 hours. A no-nonsense investigator with 15 years of experience, Santos had seen her share of missing persons cases. But something about Sarah Beth's disappearance felt different. Teenage runaways usually take their money and leave some kind of note, Santos explained to the Collins family during one of their early meetings. They don't leave their car doors open in a school parking lot with all their belongings inside. The search for Sarah Beth Collins consumed Millfield like nothing the town had ever experienced. Volunteers from 3 counties joined organized search parties that combed through the dense woods surrounding the school, dragging ponds and checking abandoned buildings within a 50-mile radius. The local newspaper, the Millfield Gazette, ran Sarah Beth's smiling senior portrait on the front page for 6 consecutive weeks, and missing person flyers appeared on every telephone pole and storefront window from Ohio to neighboring Pennsylvania. As days turned into weeks, theories began to emerge. Some suggested Sarah Beth had been the victim of a random abduction, possibly by someone passing through town on Interstate 70, which ran just 15 miles south of Millfield. Others whispered about a secret boyfriend or involvement with drugs, though anyone who truly knew Sarah Beth dismissed such speculation immediately. The girl, who volunteered at the local animal shelter every Saturday and helped her grandmother with grocery shopping every Sunday, wasn't the type to get mixed up in dangerous situations. The investigation took its first major turn 3 weeks after the disappearance, when Detective Santos received a call from a truck driver named Dale Morrison, who had been traveling through Millfield the night Sarah Beth vanished. Morrison claimed he had seen a young blonde woman arguing with a man beside a red car in the high school parking lot around 11 p.m., but hadn't thought much of it at the time. "I figured it was just some teenage drama," Morrison told Santos during his interview. "I wish I'd paid more attention to the man's face, but I was focused on getting back on the highway." Morrison's account provided the first potential lead in weeks, but it also raised more questions than answers. Who was this mysterious man? Was he someone Sarah Beth knew or a complete stranger? The truck driver's description was frustratingly vague: average height, dark clothing, possibly wearing a baseball cap. Details that could have matched half the men in Millfield. As winter settled over Ohio, the search efforts gradually decreased, though the Collins family never stopped hoping and believing their daughter would come home. Linda Collins quit her job at the local bank to focus entirely on the investigation, creating a detailed timeline of Sarah Beth's last day and maintaining contact with law enforcement agencies across multiple states. Robert continued working at the manufacturing plant, but spent every evening and weekend following up on tips and leads that seemed to arrive almost daily during the first few months. The case attracted regional media attention when America's Most Wanted featured Sarah Beth's story in February 1998. The segment generated hundreds of tips from across the country, each one carefully investigated by Detective Santos and her team. A woman in Florida claimed to have seen Sarah Beth working at a beach resort. A family in Texas reported spotting her at a truck stop. A teenager in Colorado was convinced she had sat next to Sarah Beth on a Greyhound bus. But every lead eventually went cold, leaving the Collins family with renewed hope, followed by crushing disappointment. By the first anniversary of Sarah Beth's disappearance, the active investigation had been scaled back significantly. Detective Santos, who had worked the case with unwavering dedication, was transferred to a different department, and the Millfield Police Department filed Sarah Beth's case among their cold cases, though Officer Patterson continued to review it periodically whenever new information surfaced. The Collins family held a memorial service at Millfield Community Church on October 15, 1998, exactly 1 year after their daughter had vanished. The entire town seemed to attend, filling the church beyond capacity and spilling out into the parking lot. Pastor Williams spoke about hope and faith in the face of uncertainty, while Sarah Beth's best friend, Jennifer Walsh, read a poem about friendship that left few dry eyes in the congregation. Years passed, and life in Millfield gradually returned to its normal rhythm, though Sarah Beth's disappearance remained a shadow that touched every family with teenage children. The Collins family never moved from their house on Maple Street, maintaining Sarah Beth's bedroom exactly as she had left it, with her cheerleading trophies on the dresser and her homecoming dress still hanging in the closet. Linda Collins continued to receive occasional calls from people claiming to have information about her daughter, and she dutifully passed each tip along to law enforcement, even though most proved to be either well-meaning but mistaken individuals or cruel hoaxes. The case might have remained forever unsolved, Another tragic mystery in small-town America, if not for a completely unexpected discovery that occurred in the summer of 2023, 26 years after Sarah Beth Collins had vanished from that high school parking lot. The discovery came not from law enforcement or professional investigators, but from an unlikely source that would finally begin to unravel the mystery that had haunted Millfield for more than 2 decades. Marcus Thompson had never heard of Sarah Beth Collins when he purchased the foreclosed property at 847 Pine Ridge Road in August 2023. The house had been empty for nearly 3 years after the previous owner, an elderly man named Harold Jessup, had passed away without any surviving relatives. Marcus, a 34-year-old contractor from Columbus, had bought the property as an investment, planning to renovate and flip it within 6 months. The house was typical of rural Ohio construction from the 1960s, a modest ranch-style home with 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a partially finished basement. Harold Jessup had lived there alone for the final 15 years of his life, becoming something of a recluse after retiring from his job at the local grain elevator. Neighbors remembered him as a quiet man who kept to himself, tended a small vegetable garden, and rarely had visitors. Marcus began the renovation work on a sweltering Tuesday morning in late August, starting with the basement where water damage had warped several floor joists. As he pulled up the old carpet and padding, he discovered that someone had created a makeshift storage area behind the furnace, hidden from casual view by strategically placed boxes and old furniture. It was while moving these boxes that Marcus made the discovery that would change everything. Wedged between 2 cardboard containers, filled with Harold Jessup's old tax records, was a small plastic bag containing what appeared to be personal belongings. A teenager's hair elastic, a tube of lip gloss, and a pink toothbrush with the name Sarah Beth written in fading black marker along the handle. Marcus initially assumed these items belonged to a granddaughter or young relative of Harold Jessup, but something about finding them hidden in the basement felt wrong. He decided to mention the discovery to his neighbor, Patricia Wells, an elderly woman who had lived on Pine Ridge Road for over 40 years and knew everyone in the area. Patricia's reaction was immediate and dramatic. Her face went pale as she examined the toothbrush, and her hands began to shake. "Harold never had children or grandchildren," she whispered. "And I remember this name, Sarah Beth Collins. She was the girl who disappeared after the football game back in the 90s. The realization hit Marcus like a physical blow. He was holding evidence, potential evidence, from one of the most famous missing persons cases in the region's recent history. His first instinct was to call the police immediately, but Patricia convinced him to first contact Detective Santos, who had recently retired but still lived in the county and remained emotionally invested in the Sarah Beth Collins case. Maria Santos, now 58 years old and working as a private investigator, received Marcus's call on a Thursday afternoon while reviewing insurance fraud cases in her home office. 26 years had not diminished her memory of every detail surrounding Sarah Beth's disappearance, and the mention of the toothbrush sent an electric shock through her system. "I'll be there in an hour," Santos told Marcus, her voice carrying the same urgency it had held during those first critical weeks of the investigation. "Don't touch anything else, and don't let anyone else in that basement." Santos arrived at the Pine Ridge Road property with 2 former colleagues who had also worked the Collins case, Officer Patterson, now the Millfield police chief, and forensic technician David Reynolds, who had recently retired from the county sheriff's office. The 3 veterans approached the basement with the kind of careful attention to detail that comes from decades of police work. The plastic bag containing Sarah Beth's belongings was exactly where Marcus had found it, but Santos noticed something else that the contractor had missed. The boxes surrounding the hidden storage area weren't randomly placed. They had been deliberately arranged to conceal what lay behind them. Someone had taken considerable care to ensure these items would remain undiscovered unless the entire basement was thoroughly searched. But the most chilling discovery was yet to come. As Reynolds carefully processed the scene with his portable forensic kit, he found additional evidence that Harold Jessup had gone to great lengths to hide. A small jewelry box containing a class ring from Millfield High School, class of 1998, with the initials SBC engraved inside the band. It was Sarah Beth's ring, the one she had been wearing the night she disappeared, according to her parents' detailed description provided to investigators 26 years earlier. The implications were staggering. Harold Jessup, the quiet man who had lived less than 5 miles from the Collins family home, the person who had attended Sarah Beth's memorial service and had even contributed to the reward fund established by her parents, had somehow obtained her most personal belongings. Santos felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that had driven her through countless investigations over the years. After more than 2 decades, they finally had a concrete lead. But it came with the frustrating reality that Harold Jessup had died 3 years earlier, taking any explanation for these items to his grave. Chief Patterson immediately contacted the Collins family, a phone call he had dreaded making for over 25 years. Linda Collins, now 67 years old, answered on the second ring, and Patterson could hear the hope and fear warring in her voice as he explained the discovery. Robert Collins, battling the early stages of Parkinson's disease, wept openly when his wife told him about the toothbrush with their daughter's name. "We always knew someone in town had to know something," Linda said during her interview with Santos the following day. "Harold Jessup, I remember him. He was at the memorial service, sitting in the back pew. I thought it was kind of him to come, since he didn't really know our family." The investigation into Harold Jessup's connection to Sarah Beth Collins began immediately, but it faced significant challenges. Jessup had lived alone for many years, had no close friends or confidants, and had apparently been meticulous about covering his tracks. His house had been cleaned out by an estate sale company after his death, and most of his personal papers had been discarded or donated to charity. However, Detective Santos's years of experience had taught her that even the most careful criminals leave traces of their actions. She began reconstructing Harold Jessup's life, starting with his employment records, his whereabouts on the night Sarah Beth disappeared, and any connections he might have had to the Collins family or Millfield High School. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. While reviewing old employment records at the grain elevator where Jessup had worked, Santos discovered that he had called in sick on October 16, 1997, the day after Sarah Beth's disappearance. According to his supervisor's notes, Jessup had claimed to have a severe case of food poisoning and hadn't returned to work for nearly a week. More significantly, Santos learned that Harold Jessup had been working a part-time security job at various local events during the 1990s, including high school football games. A review of old payment records showed that Jessup had been scheduled to work security at Millfield High School on October 15, 1997, the night Sarah Beth Collins vanished. The pieces of the puzzle were finally beginning to fall into place, but Santos knew that establishing Harold Jessup's presence at the school that night was only the beginning. She needed to understand exactly what had happened to Sarah Beth, and more importantly, she needed to find out where Harold Jessup had taken her after that confrontation in the parking lot that the truck driver had witnessed 26 years earlier. The investigation took on new urgency as Santos realized that Sarah Beth's remains might still be discoverable. If Harold Jessup had killed her and hidden her body somewhere on his property or in a location known only to him, there was still a chance to bring closure to the Collins family and finally answer the questions that had tormented an entire community for more than 2 decades. Santos organized a comprehensive search of the Pine Ridge Road property, bringing in ground-penetrating radar equipment, cadaver dogs, and a team of forensic archaeologists from the State University. The search would take weeks, but for the first time since October 1997, there was genuine reason to hope that Sarah Beth Collins would finally be coming home. The ground-penetrating radar detected several anomalies in Harold Jessup's backyard during the first week of September 2023. The readings showed what appeared to be a disturbed area approximately 6 feet long and 3 feet wide, located beneath what had once been a small garden shed that Jessup had torn down sometime in the early 2000s. The forensic team worked methodically, carefully excavating the site, while dozens of law enforcement officers and Collins family members maintained a vigil at the property's perimeter. On September 12, 2023, 25 years, 10 months and 28 days after Sarah Beth Collins had disappeared from the Millfield High School parking lot, the excavation team made the discovery everyone had been hoping for and dreading in equal measure. Wrapped in a deteriorated blue tarp and buried approximately 4 feet below ground level were the skeletal remains of a young woman, along with fragments of clothing and jewelry that matched the description of what Sarah Beth had been wearing the night she vanished. Dr. Elizabeth Carter, the forensic anthropologist leading the excavation, worked with painstaking precision to document every detail of the burial site. The remains were carefully transported to the county morgue, where a positive identification was made through dental records within 48 hours. After more than a quarter-century of uncertainty, Sarah Beth Collins was finally coming home. The discovery of Sarah Beth's remains provided the closure the Collins family had desperately needed, but it also raised new questions about Harold Jessup's motives and the circumstances surrounding her death. The medical examiner's preliminary findings suggested that Sarah Beth had died from blunt force trauma to the head, likely from a single devastating blow that would have rendered her unconscious immediately. Santos worked with the county prosecutor's office to piece together the most likely sequence of events from that October night in 1997. Based on the evidence they had gathered, they believed Harold Jessup had approached Sarah Beth in the school parking lot, possibly offering help with her car or claiming there was some kind of emergency. When she resisted or tried to leave, Jessup had struck her with an unknown object, likely killing her instantly or within minutes. The truck driver's account of seeing Sarah Beth arguing with a man beside her car now made perfect sense. It hadn't been an argument at all. It had been Harold Jessup attempting to lure Sarah Beth away from the safety of the public parking lot. When his initial approach failed, he had resorted to violence, then loaded Sarah Beth's body into his own vehicle and driven to his property on Pine Ridge Road, where he buried her in what would become her grave for the next 26 years. But questions remained about Harold Jessup's psychological profile and whether Sarah Beth had been his only victim. Santos coordinated with law enforcement agencies across Ohio and neighboring states to review unsolved missing persons cases from the 1980s and 1990s, looking for any patterns that might connect Harold Jessup to other disappearances. The investigation revealed disturbing details about Jessup's past that had never come to light during the original missing person investigation. Former co-workers described him as someone who made inappropriate comments about young women and who seemed to take special interest in high school sporting events and activities. A review of his work schedule showed that he had requested security assignments at schools and youth events far more frequently than other part-time security guards. Most troubling of all, Santos discovered that Harold Jessup had maintained detailed scrapbooks containing newspaper clippings about missing persons cases throughout Ohio and Pennsylvania. These scrapbooks, found in a storage unit that Jessup had rented under an assumed name, contained hundreds of articles about young women who had disappeared over a 30-year period, with several cases bearing striking similarities to Sarah Beth's disappearance. The Collins family faced the complex emotions that come with finally learning the truth about their daughter's fate. Linda Collins, who had spent 26 years hoping her daughter might still be alive somewhere, struggled with the finality of knowing that Sarah Beth had been dead since that October night in 1997. But she also expressed profound relief that her daughter's remains had been found and that the family could finally lay Sarah Beth to rest. For 26 years, I've wondered if Sarah Beth was out there somewhere, maybe with amnesia or being held against her will, Linda told reporters during a press conference at the Millfield Police Department. Part of me kept hoping she would walk through our front door and everything would be okay. Now I know that's never going to happen, but I also know she's not suffering anymore, and we can finally say goodbye properly. Robert Collins, whose Parkinson's disease had progressed significantly since the initial investigation, was less able to articulate his feelings, but his tears during the press conference spoke volumes about the emotional toll the case had taken on the entire family. Their son, Michael Collins, who had been 14 when Sarah Beth disappeared and was now a 40-year-old father of 3, served as the family's primary spokesperson during the final phase of the investigation. "My sister was an amazing person who had her whole life ahead of her," Michael said. "She wanted to be a teacher, she wanted to get married and have children, she wanted to travel and see the world. Harold Jessup stole all of that from her, and he stole 26 years of peace from our family. But now we can honor her memory properly and make sure she's never forgotten." The funeral service for Sarah Beth Collins was held on October 15, 2023, exactly 26 years after her disappearance. The Millfield Community Church was once again filled beyond capacity, with many of the same people who had attended the memorial service in 1998 returning to finally say goodbye. Sarah Beth's cheerleading teammates, now women in their 40s with children of their own, served as honorary pallbearers, wearing their old letter jackets in tribute to their friend. Detective Maria Santos, who had worked tirelessly on the case for more than a quarter-century, delivered a eulogy that captured the impact Sarah Beth's life and disappearance had on the entire community. Sarah Beth Collins was 17 years old when her life was cut short, Santos said. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a bright light in this community. Her disappearance changed all of us, but it also brought out the best in people who refused to give up hope and never stopped caring. The investigation into Harold Jessup's activities continued even after Sarah Beth's funeral, as law enforcement agencies worked to determine whether he had been responsible for other unsolved disappearances. While no definitive links were established to other cases, several families of missing persons contacted Santos to share information about their own loved ones, hoping that the breakthrough in Sarah Beth's case might provide new leads in their own searches for answers. The story of Sarah Beth Collins' disappearance and the eventual discovery of her remains became a powerful reminder of the importance of never giving up on cold cases and the dedication of law enforcement officers who continue to seek justice even decades after crimes are committed. It also highlighted the impact that a single missing person case can have on an entire community, and the healing that can come from finally learning the truth, no matter how painful that truth might be. As autumn returned to Millfield in 2023, the town seemed different somehow, lighter, as if a weight that had been pressing down on the community for 26 years had finally been lifted. Sarah Beth Collins was home at last, resting in Millfield Cemetery under a headstone that bore the inscription her parents had chosen: "Beloved daughter and sister, forever 17, forever in our hearts." The pink toothbrush with Sarah Beth written in fading black marker remained in the evidence room at the county sheriff's office, a small but significant artifact that had finally brought a family the closure they had sought for more than half their lifetimes. It served as a reminder that sometimes the smallest details can unlock the biggest mysteries, and that the truth, no matter how long it takes to emerge, has a way of eventually coming to light. Detective Santos, now working exclusively as a private investigator, kept a photograph of Sarah Beth Collins on her desk. Not the missing person poster that had haunted the investigation for so many years, but a candid shot of Sarah Beth laughing with her friends at a school pep rally captured just weeks before her disappearance. It was a reminder of the vibrant young woman whose life had been stolen, but also of the importance of fighting for justice, even when that fight takes 26 years to reach its conclusion. The case of Sarah Beth Collins would be remembered not just as a tragic story of a life cut short, but as a testament to the power of persistence, the importance of community, and the unbreakable bonds of family love that endure even in the face of unimaginable loss. Her story had finally reached its end, but her memory would live on in the hearts of everyone who had known her, loved her, and never stopped believing that someday, somehow, she would find her way home.